So the Asuka period and Nara period are another turning point in that this pivotal event happens in 552. Buddhism and Buddhist art arrive. So this tradition that now is 1,000 years old and has moved from South Asia through Central Asia into China and Korea has now come to Japan. And the legend has it that the Korean messenger brought a copy of the sutras, which are the written texts of the Buddha's statements and teachings, and that a messenger was sent to the Ise shrine to consult with Amaterasu, the sun goddess, to see what she thought about this Buddhist stuff. And she replied, "Buddha and I are of the same nature." So a statement that essentially Buddhism and the animistic nature worshipping of Shinto can indeed be integrated as they would be. So your textbook does a nice job discussing the elements from Korean and Chinese tradition that are now flowing into Japanese culture. And first and foremost, Buddhism, also important, a centralized government structure, and definitely the system of writing. And this will include a very close, faithful integration of Chinese artistic style into Japanese Buddhist art. So if you look here, we talked about the Sui dynasty altar to Amitabha Buddha, this bronze, and we talked about how it was showing sort of Chinese characteristics. Here is Tori Bushi's Buddha Shaka and attendant bodhisattvas. This is a bronze complex of 3 figures, Buddha, bodhisattvas, and it's made in Japan, but it is very clearly an artwork that is wanting to be thoroughly Chinese in its bronze, symmetrical, linear complexity, the waterfall style drapery that we talked about. So this is quite different than what we were kind of picking out as important traits of Japanese artistic tradition early on, the love of the natural imperfection, the raw materials. So this is a point where actually the Japanese artists who are making Buddhist art will be so closely modeling their work on Chinese precedents that art historians today will study Chinese artistic style of the time by looking at Japanese art, because much of it has been lost from China. Japan's very good at preserving things. We'll talk about that, not just the Ise shrine. But so you have in 600 a work that's made in Japan, but it is actually a great example of what Chinese bronze sculptors are doing. And we know that because of how faithfully Japan is emulating and integrating Chinese art. And I said the Japanese are very good at preserving things, and this is the most beautiful example of that talent. This is the Horyuji monastic complex, a Buddhist monastery complex, and it is the most important surviving sacred Buddhist architecture in Japan. It is also the oldest wooden temple in the world. So it's built in the 700s. Now, DVC built its art building in the 1970s, and we're having to tear it down and build a new one because it was a wooden structure and we didn't preserve it well enough. And the DVC president has decided we're not going to have any more wooden structures. Well, the Japanese are able to keep these wooden structures looking beautiful for more than 1,000 years. I guess they learned from the Ise shrine. So this site was founded by a Japanese ruler, Prince Shotoku, who was a very serious devotee of Buddhism. And this is an example of the fact that, as we see in so many religions around the world, when the ruling class takes seriously a religion and patronizes it, that religion spreads, and we get much more art, and we get much more highly ambitious and quite expensive art. So we have these wonderful buildings, and they are based on Chinese architectural style. So they actually preserve the kind of architecture that was widespread in China at the time. I made this little note here, but with a Japanese concern for the relationship of building to landscape, to just show that, all of these elements of the architecture, from the tile roof to the bracket system to the form of the pagoda, these are all brought from China. But the Japanese architects have really retained their Shinto sense of the sacredness of nature in the way that they have integrated the trees with the buildings, and the buildings seem to be nestled in the trees. And so the stupa that you learned about, going back to the great stupa at Sanchi, that reliquary form as a cosmic diagram, has traveled, it has evolved, and it has merged with the Han Dynasty watchtower form to become this very vertical form, still with an axis mundi, and to now have this marvelous roofline, which is using wooden bracket and beam architecture in a modular system. So once again, we have our Chinese technology of systematic units. And what's interesting about this architecture is the weight is held up. That's why I'm showing you the cross section here. So you can see all those brackets, that network of brackets, are holding up the weight of the roof, not the walls. And of course, the curved roof, I'm saying, is distinctive feature of Chinese architecture. But, you know, if you're in Japan and you're wanting to emulate and align with Chinese culture, why not use the glorious swooping roof? Because at this point in the Tang Dynasty, China is the world hegemon. That means the dominant power in its area of the globe. And so it's a little bit like America today. You know, people all over the globe are influenced by American movies and will wear American jeans and American tennis shoes, because America's cultural kind of force is so great that other cultures want to align themselves with it in their way of situating themselves in relationship to the great cultural dominating force of the time.